Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Friday, May 15th, 2015, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Tonight, should amnesty be given to looters and rioters? Then report, woman fired for refusing her employer's spy tech, and a school deems Old Glory too offensive to display. That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
What type of balkanized country is this, where you can't have an American flag t-shirt, and how effective the establishment has been at creating division in this country?
A South Carolina school folded on their flag ban after a student rolled up with a squad of veterans. This was 18-year-old senior Peyton Robinson. He was ordered to remove 2 American flags from his truck. The school initially told him it was because some could possibly find it offensive. School officials then changed their tune, citing safety concerns, saying it could be a visual hazard, these flags. By Thursday, however, the school completely reversed its position following protests by students, parents, and veterans who flocked to school grounds waving U.S. flags.
It's freedom. Do you want to fly a flag? Fly it. What the heck?
When I hear that you can't fly the flag, it makes my blood run red, and my blood is red.
And it just proves if you stand up for your country, you stand up for what you believe in, things get changed.
And the school released this announcement on their website. They said, due to the outstanding display of patriotism through peaceful demonstration, it is apparent to us that many are not happy about this policy. Now, school officials are going to be reviewing the standing policy regarding flags. They've decided that an exception will be made for the American flag, as long as the size of the flag, isn't going to create a driving hazard. So hooray, in America, we are allowed to fly the American flag. It's not offensive. Isn't that absurd? But now some also justices served for another man who decided to stand up for what is right. We reported on this earlier in the week about the IRS seizing more than $100,000 from a convenience store owner, Lyndon McClellan. They said he was making large cash deposits like a convenience store owner might do. The IRS initially offered him a settlement. They said that they would give him half of his money back, but McClellan refused. He said for him, the government seizure of his more than $107,000 is a matter of what's right and wrong. So after months of sleepless nights and thousands in litigation fees, the government said they're going to dismiss the case. The U.S. Attorney Thomas Walker cited changes to the Department of Justice's policy regarding civil asset forfeiture that was made in March as the reason for dropping this lawsuit against McClellan, against the bank account they seized these assets last July. So it's a good thing that he stuck it out and didn't decide to go for that settlement. Initially, they said that he needed to decide by March. Had he agreed to take that as settlement and just get half of his money back, he wouldn't be able to have gotten all of his money back. Most people do agree to the settlement because they can't afford to fight it. They can't afford to fight for their property. Now McClellan is continuing to press forward to see if he can get his attorney's fees covered, as well as the loss in the interest that he would have received with having that money in the bank, because the government is required by law to put that money that they've seized in an interest-bearing account, and the government wants to keep the interest that they earned on the money that they seized. So it's totally infuriating because the man was never even charged with the crime. Never. They just took his money and then he had to fight for it back. So obviously another bully government agency run amok, and in this case, it seems they're getting a little bit of justice served. Now, a California woman raised some red flags here for me, but she is suing her former employer. She was claiming that she was fired after she deleted an app from her phone that was a required app. It was tracking her movements 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and this was an app required by her work. Myrna Arias says she works for the Intermex wire transfer service when she says her boss, John Stubitz, fired her for deleting the Zora job management app from her smartphone. Zora tracks and manages mobile employees while they're in the field. Now, Arias said that when she and her fellow employees asked Stubitz if he could track them when they weren't working, Stubitz admitted that employees would be monitored while off duty, and he bragged that he knew how fast she was driving at specific moments ever since she had installed the app on her phone. So this is pretty jarring to me because we already know that a lot of companies are requiring that their employees give them access to all of their social media accounts. Now they're going to require that you download apps on your phone that are able to track all of your movements so your boss can see what you're up to. So absolutely pretty crazy there. Now we have another story on InfoWars today. Rioters in Baltimore caused more than $9 million in property damage during the Freddie Gray protests. And now the Southern Christian Leadership Conference is leading the charge. Several groups are calling for amnesty for those who've been arrested. A Facebook page titled "Massive Protest Amnesty for All Arrestees. Drop the Charges. Baltimore's youth are not thugs. Release all those arrested." And they announced that they're going to be holding a protest Saturday, May 16th at 3 p.m. So that will be tomorrow. Now, the Baltimore People's Power Assembly admits that the call for amnesty is for those who looted stores and destroyed private property. The group explains in a statement, they say, "How can city officials equate property damage with the life of a human being? The youth of Baltimore need our support. We demand drop all charges and grant full amnesty. The people of Baltimore, especially the youth, need full employment at a livable wage, decent education, and housing, not jails, racism, and police terror." So obviously I don't disagree with the last part of that statement. But, I mean, these riots, this looting went on for days. It's not as if it was just in one little fit of rage and just in this inflamed passion here this happened. It was dragged out over a course of days. $9 million in property damage took place. So do we really want to set the precedent, especially as we're being warned that we can expect more unrest to be unfolding in cities across America? We're starting this cycle of unrest. So are we basically setting a precedent that looting and rioting and millions of dollars in property damage is going to be okay, and that when you do that, you're just going to get off? But on the same token, where are the consequences for some of these police officers who are getting away with the crimes that they're committing? Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh says he is not backing off anything that he said in his blockbuster 10,000-word story that was released this week, arguing that the official account of the American raid that took down Osama bin Laden is based on one big lie. He says what is arguably seen as the apex of Obama's presidency is actually built on a lie. Seymour Hersh refuses to back down. Now, this story has been debated all throughout the week. A lot of people are attacking not only his account, but also his credibility as a journalist.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Leanne, for people to remember that Seymour Hersh has broken a lot of major stories, things that have really had huge impact on the history of this nation. One of them, of course, is the Church Committee. That came from an investigative report by Seymour Hersh back in 1974. Here's the title of this: "Huge CIA operation reported in U.S. against anti-war forces and other dissidents in Nixon years." And they point out in the article that at least 10,000 Americans were maintained, a list of 10,000 Americans maintained by a special unit of the CIA that reported directly to the director, Richard Helms. Now, of course, Richard Helms, you famously see the pictures of him at the Church Committee hearing, holding up the assassination gun and other things. The Church Committee hearing focused primarily on the CIA, primarily focused on sensational items like that, assassinations. He, however, really got to the crux of the matter, and it was picked up by Pike, and they had a House committee hearing at the same time that the Senate had its Church Committee hearing. Pike, who headed that in the House, really got to the gist of what was going on. He asked some very important questions. One of the things that he got out of that was an admission by the CIA director that the NSA was tapping people's phone lines. So this is something that goes back to the 1970s. As a matter of fact, he points out in his article that it goes back to the 1950s that the CIA was collecting information on Americans. This is something that was started even before that by Lyndon, after that, I should say, by Lyndon Johnson, who wanted the CIA to start doing counterintelligence operations on people who are anti-war, who are protesters, that sort of thing. Not just the FBI. Everybody's heard of the FBI's COINTEL program. Most people have forgotten about Seymour Hersh's revelations about the CIA, and most people have completely forgotten about the fact that that resulted in the Pike Committee exposing the NSA and what they were doing to American citizens.
Right, and we also learned that there in that hearing as well, that the CIA was working with the media as well on their COINTELPRO.
And with corporations. We found that the NSA was working with AT&T, Western Union, the same types of large corporations that had the communications infrastructure. They were using that along with the corporations, major corporations, to spy on the American people. I think it's important when we look at the fact that this was the first public testimony of the NSA to remember that today, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, now that Republicans have the majority, Richard Burr from North Carolina, has says he doesn't think there ever ought to be any intelligence hearing committees, that the public should not know anything that the intelligence community does. The other thing that came out of this was we had the first lies of an NSA director to the public. That came out of the Pike Committee hearings. He also lied about tapping the phones and everything. He pointed out, he asked, why are we doing this? What is the mission statement of the intelligence community? Is it effective? Is it making us safer? He pointed out failures, Leanne, that had just recently occurred. Their failure to see the 1968 Tet Offensive, their failure to see the 1974 coup in Portugal, the 1974 invasion of Cyprus by Turkey, the 1973 Yom Kippur War. All those were missed by the NSA, by the CIA, even though they were spying on political dissidents in the United States. Perhaps that's why they missed all those things.
We're in a time loop.
Exactly. Today we see, well, we have to do all this because of security, because of terrorism. Today they had
spying on Occupy protesters or vegan potlucks, and
exactly. And today we have the verdict and the Boston bombings, Tsarnaev brothers. Where was the NSA? Where was the CIA in terms of finding these guys? So yet another failure to that.
So they've never really been about stopping terrorism. It's always been about crushing dissent. Absolutely.
There's another parallel in this, Leanne, in terms of the Pike Committee hearings, and that is the way we're seeing the TPP handled today. The fact that we have members of Congress, unfortunately, most of them can't even be bothered to read it. There is a provision for them set up to read it. But as Rand Paul pointed out, and as others have pointed out, you have to go to a special room. You have to sign in.
Someone hovers over your shoulder. You've got to destroy any notes you take.
You can't take those notes out with you. They responded, real prevarication, saying, of course you can read it, but you can't tell anybody what you've read. Okay?
This message will self-destruct.
Yeah, you can take notes, but you can't take those notes out with you. Okay? And so you had a similar thing happen with the NSA when they came before the Pike Committee. He said, where is your charter? Because the CIA had a charter, which they violated, okay? But he said, where's your charter? And then the guy says, well, you know, you can go down somewhere to look at it. This is the back and forth that goes between Pike and the head of the NSA. He said, you're talking about a document that set up the entire NSA. It's one which all members of Congress are entitled to see without shuttling back and forth downtown to look at it. And he came back and says, well, I can't show it to you because it's got secret material in it. And he goes, well, it seems incredible to me, frankly, this is Pike saying, that we're asked to appropriate large amounts of money for that agency, and in those days it was $10 billion. Today that'd be probably about $50 billion, which employs large numbers of people without being provided a copy of the piece of paper by which the agency is authorized. He didn't want the paperwork put into the congressional, in the public domain, because they weren't created by legislation. They weren't created by charter. They were created by executive orders of Truman. So this problem that we have with executive orders, this problem with excessive secrecy, with agencies that are absolutely black, that cannot, the public cannot see anything that they're doing, just like these trade organizations, just like today's NSA and CIA. This has all been going on since World War II, probably earlier than that, but certainly that's been the pattern for a very long time.
So the tyranny is nothing new, and journalists like Seymour Hersh, who are going to go that extra mile and dig deep and find out about things like this, they are a threat, seen as a threat. And so obviously one of the big things that people are saying, well, we can't take this story seriously, is because he uses anonymous sources.
Yes, and they criticized him for that at the time. The Washington Post criticized him for that in this expose of the CIA. At the same